Hey everyone, here we are, Module 1 lecture video. This is getting us started with this whole process. We're going to talk about a lot of terms that you'll be using the rest of the way in this course. So please make sure you take good notes and follow along. So here we go. So we've talked about it a little bit. You probably heard it in some of the videos that you've been looking at, but we are taking the approach of looking at cinema through a production lens, right? So how the films are made and what the filmmakers are doing to convey the story that they're trying to tell, right? So our 5 terms that we're going to be using all semester long, our terms for critical analysis, are going to be the narrative, which is the directing and the writing of the movie, cinematography, the editing, the acting, and the sound design. Okay, so we're going to go through each one of those and give you a little bit of kind of a better understanding as to what we're talking about. And then with each film, we will specifically discuss those elements within each film that we actually watch. All right. So narrative, the directing and the writing. Now, oftentimes in cinema, the writer and the director can be the same person, but oftentimes it's not the case. Right? So it's hard to kind of decipher where the writer ends their role, kind of what part of the movie is the writer's part and what is the directing, because it all kind of melts together at that point, right? So what we're talking about when we're talking about the writing and the directing, we're talking about things like the topic of the movie, what are some of the underlying themes, so like, I don't know, like, there could be a whole bunch of things that could be a theme to a movie, like good versus evil. There's a basic theme that might run in some films. What kind of storytelling are they using? Are they first-person storytelling? Are we kind of looking at it through somebody else's eyes? Is it very kind of like a subjective look at something or an objective look at something? Whose point of view are we looking at this whole story through? Is there a moral to the story, right? Sometimes films will have that kind of moral undertone to it. Is it a political film? Is there some kind of message that they're trying to get across? So sometimes those aren't even very obvious when you're looking at the film, but you have to kind of go back and analyze it and re-look at it, maybe watch it a few times, and you might find that there's these other things that weren't right there at the surface. Okay, the story structure. Is it a traditional story structure or is it kind of an experimental? So is it telling the film narratively from beginning to end in kind of a linear fashion, or are we bouncing around in the story and maybe being, looking at a film being told out of sequence? Or are we looking at a film that takes place with a lot of flashbacks or flash forwards or both of those? Those would all be kind of experimental or untraditional styles of filmmaking. Okay. Moving on to cinematography. What elements are in the frame? That's like the basic question of cinematography. What's in the frame? Is there camera movement in a shot? Is the camera objective or subjective? So are we in the action or are we observing the action from a distance? Where's the camera and why did they put it there? So oftentimes filmmakers are trying to emphasize something, and so when they do use a shot, like a close-up shot of something, there's a reason why they're using that close-up shot. So learning to understand, okay, what they're trying to tell us is part of the process. Moving on to editing. So does the image ever change, right? Is it just one long shot throughout the whole movie? Which there are some films that try to do that in history. 1917 was a film that was most recently made that tried to do kind of the one shot, it's all one shot kind of thing. There's a film a few years back called Birdman that tried to do the same thing. And you can go all the way back to, I believe it's like 1948, Alfred Hitchcock made a film called Rope that's all meant to look like one shot that never ends. Does it change? And if it does change, what does it change to? And how frequently does it change? Can you detect kind of a rhythm or a pace to the cutting style that they're using? Oftentimes that'll be employed. Okay. Are they using any transitions from one frame to another? So transitions would be things like a cut going from one shot to another, just cutting to another image. That's a type of transition, but it's pretty hard and straightforward. We also use dissolves, where one image kind of comes in and takes over the other image. There's something called a wipe, which they use in like Star Wars a lot. They use a wipe dissolve. Are they match cutting or using any kind of form editing? So we'll talk about what match cutting and form editing are when we get to that spot. There'll be some films that we look at that use match cuts, and we will talk about that. When we're looking at the acting performance, are the actors, are they melodramatic or are they believable? Right? So melodramatic would be kind of overacting or kind of theatrical in its approach. Believable or pretty contemporary would be, is this feel very like real what we're looking at? Different types of films have different style of performance types, and it depends on the film and what the film's about and when the film was made, kind of how that plays out. So we'll look at that. Do they use an accent? And is the accent of the actual actor, right? So we're going to be looking at films that are international. Sometimes they'll be speaking English, sometimes they won't. But sometimes when they're speaking English, are they using an accent? Why are they using an accent? Is it fit the character? Is there some other story reason why they have an accent? There's a whole bunch of reasons why it could be. But it could just be pretty straightforward as well. Okay? What are they doing with their eyes and their voice? Okay, so a lot of the actors' performance, you're going to be able to see it in their eyes, okay, and their facial expressions as a whole. So you want to look at that. Sometimes their face and their eyes might be saying one thing, but what's coming out of their mouth is a completely different thing, and that's important stuff to know. Okay, and then what are they doing with their voice? Like, how are they using their voice? Are they speaking quietly? Are they yelling? Are they screaming? Those are our indications as to what's going on within the context of the storyline. And all those things are super important. Like, actors make choices about their characters and how they're going to perform in the scene based on the story, based on their character's arc, like their how they start the film to ending up how they finish the film as a person. There are a lot of choices that they make when it comes to how they decide to play a role. So getting into the nuances of performance and what's good and what's bad, or what you like and what you don't like, not necessarily what's good and what's bad, but more about what it is you like or what you see and what you can pick out. Okay. Do they connect with the audience, which is the most important thing of it all? If you have an acting performance that just doesn't resonate or you don't connect with, it's going to make it hard for you to watch the film. But when you watch films that you really kind of are tied to and invested in the characters, part of that is because the actor is doing a good job and they are connecting with the audience, or they're connecting with you. Another element is going to be sound design. All right. Number one, first question is there sound? So one of the films that we do watch, the earliest film we do watch one silent film. So in the film, there's actually no sound, but there is an audio track of music that's put in later to help kind of keep the pace of the film up. But is there sound in the movie? Is there dialogue? So that first film that we look at, that first, it's the third film we watch, but it's the furthest we go back in history. It's actually 1922's Nosferatu, one of the first horror films ever made. In that film, there won't be any dialogue, okay? But in every other film we watch, there will be dialogue, okay? So if there is dialogue, the dialogue is going a long way to help tell the story. So we got to pay attention to what they're saying and how they're saying it. Are there sound effects being used, okay? So learning to understand the difference between we're just hearing the ambient sound of what's going on, or sound effects are being added to accent or augment the sounds that were really there. That's important to take note of sometimes. Is there music? Okay. Is there song or score? So music could be one of two things. Number one, it could be a score that was written specifically for the movie, for the scene that you're watching. But also some movies use just traditional songs, like music written for the radio or whatever, and they use that and play it as part of the film, right? There's a whole bunch of films that have done that in history. I mean, I'm trying to think of stuff that's modern that does it, because there are plenty of modern examples, but the stuff that pops to my head are older movies like Pulp Fiction or The Wedding Singer, or There's one that's brand new, actually, that's pretty new, just came out, I think, 2023. It is a film called The Killer, which is made by David Fincher, who's made a bunch of films. It's a Netflix film that's, I believe, nominated for, or will be nominated for a bunch of awards. And they use kind of the soundtrack from a group called The Smiths. Throughout the film, and those are songs that weren't made for the movie. They're just songs that were played on the radio many years before, and they're used to kind of tell the story. Does the sound impact the pace or the audience response? So that's one of the things to pay attention to. When you're watching the film, are you noticing the sound and the audio that's there and the music that's in the background? Is it helping kind of increase the tension or whatever it might be in that particular scene? Or is it something that's just kind of there that you're not really noticing, right? So is it helping the scene in a very subtle way, or is it really an impactful part of the watching experience? And we will watch films that do that in both ways. We'll watch films that it's right there in your face, the music is kind of guiding the image, and other scenes where we watch in films where it's just kind of this undertone that's helping add to the overall kind of flavor of the scene, so to speak. So this week, I talked about it, I think, in the housekeeping video. We're watching a short film. So the film should go by pretty quick. It's only 14, maybe 18 minutes long total. It's a 2004 short film that was nominated for an Academy Award. It's called Our Time Is Up. The writer-director is a guy named Rob Perlstein. Again, it's Academy Award nominated short film, and you should recognize some of the actors. Some of the actors have went on to be bigger actors. You may or may not recognize some of them, but there's at least 3 that I can think of off the top of my head that are went on to have decent careers. Again, when you're looking on the film page, the movie's going to look like it's an hour and a half long. You just have to watch the first film, which is called Our Time Is Up with Kevin Pollak. Okay, and he's one of the actors that's had a pretty decent career. So make sure that's the film that you're watching. And again, you're more than welcome to watch the rest of them, but you don't have to. The film we're responsible for this week is Our Time Is Up. Now, in shorts and features, you can still analyze all 5 elements, okay? We're just trying to take a smaller film so that you don't really have to kind of break down kind of a 2-hour-long film. We could just look at a very short film and still try to figure out how these different elements impact the storytelling and how we experience the film and the story itself. All right, so something to think about there. Again, it's 14 minutes long, contains a complete story arc. So it does have a story arc for our character. So our story does follow one character, and the character we're following is Kevin Pollak's character. And we do see him at the beginning of the film, and he's got a certain way about him and thought process about how he goes about things. And then by the end of the film, he's a different person, and that's what we call a story arc. Look for those 5 elements when you're watching the film. You should be able to watch this film 2 or 3 times because it's so short, and maybe go back and just try to pick out a couple of them each time you watch it to kind of see what they do intentionally to kind of help tell the story, right? There's a few things that they do with each element that are really impactful to the storytelling. Again, those 5 elements would be directing, writing, which is the storytelling, cinematography, acting, editing, and sound design. Make sure that you post in the discussion board on first day of class. Make sure you get that done because I got to make sure you're taking the class. Your responses to classmates, you don't have to do those until a little later. You have more time for that. There's also going to be a short quiz. The quizzes are always about 8 questions long. They're worth 24 points. The discussion board is worth 26 points. And again, with the discussion board, you're always going to have 2 prompts in the discussion boards. I need at least 5 sentences per prompt, and then I need you to respond to your classmates with at least 5 sentences. You got to give some depth to your answers. It can't just be, oh yeah, I really agree with that. That's not going to fly. You're going to see that you'll lose points by not getting in depth with what you write. So at least a paragraph, 5 sentences for everything I'm asking you to write. All the modules work the same. You're going to see the same page count of pages, and they'll go in the same order every single week. So you should be pretty comfortable with after you get through the first couple of modules. It's all going to be smooth sailing from there. You'll kind of understand what's going on. I post all the films, so you don't have to go look for any of the films. So make sure that you don't have to worry about that. The class moves fast. It's a 4-week class, which means we're doing 4 modules every single week. So make sure that you're getting through done. A lot of students try to do a module a day for 4 days, and then they get the weekend off. So you do module 1 on Monday, do module 2 on Tuesday, do module 3 on Wednesday, module 4 on Thursday, and then you have Friday and Saturday off. But everything is due technically on Sunday at 5 p.m. Excuse me. So remember that. So 5 p.m., not midnight or anything like that. I don't want anybody telling me or asking me why it's not midnight. It's not midnight. It's 5 o'clock. So I'm telling you that. I've said it a bunch of times. Make sure you know the date. It's probably a better way, if you can, to kind of do a module a day and maybe even just be done by Friday so you get the weekend off. That's a great approach. But it does move fast. Make sure you're having fun and enjoy the films. We're going to watch a lot of cool films. Engage with your classmates through the discussion board since we don't have actual class. And let's get to work. So hopefully you're looking forward to the class. Again, we're watching pretty cool films. So let me know if you got questions. I want to be a resource for you. And let's just get started. We'll talk soon.